Welcome to the September 23rd Eclipse OpenJ9 community call. As always, please add your name and affiliation to the agenda just so we know who's been joining the calls regularly. And at this point, I will pause and give anyone an opportunity to add things to the any other business section or to bring up concerns or comments or things that need to be discussed right off the top. Okay. This is not the only opportunity to do that. If something comes up during the call, either jump in, or if there's something, sort of another topic that comes to mind, feel free to add it to the any other business section, and we'll address those as we get through the agenda. So Theresa, I have you tentatively scheduled for a lightning talk today. Are you ready to do that?
Yeah, I'm ready.
Okay, let me stop sharing and you can take over.
Okay. Okay, can you see my slides?
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. All right, we'll get started then. Hey everyone, my name's Theresa Mammarella. I'm a software engineer at Red Hat, previously IBM, and I implemented the JEP 360 field classes support for OpenJ9 for Java 15. So I'm going to talk to you about the feature today and what it is and why and how it should be used. Okay. So this should look a little bit familiar in terms of the purpose of this. So I did a talk about records, I think in February, that came out in Java 14, and that was to try to make data modeling a little bit nicer, more concise, and cleaner for Java. And this is also related to data modeling, but instead of within one class, it's data modeling with inheritance. So the current assumption for Java is that its inheritance is always for code reuse, but that's not always the case, especially when you're modeling things like data. So the example I have here is basically a calculator. I got it from the link that's at the bottom of the screen from data classes and field types for Java. So for each button on a calculator, basically, they all have very specific functions that they need to do. There's probably not going to be a default case for this. So having the interface fully open to new classes to extend it doesn't really make that much sense, but it's something that we've just had to deal with. So currently the only options to limit it right now are to make that class final, which means it could have no subclasses, or a common trick that's done is making the constructor be package private. So only classes within that package can extend it, but then that makes it harder to iterate over all of those options later if you're trying to do like a switch statement or something. So the goals summarized for this JEP is to allow the author of a class or interface to control which code is responsible for implementing it. So a finite number. Provide a more declarative way than access modifiers to restrict the use of a superclass, and support future directions in pattern matching by underpinning the exhaustive analysis of patterns. And I'll get into that last one a bit later. So this is what it looks like. There's a field modifier that can be added to classes. And what goes along with that modifier is a list of classes that are allowed to extend this interface, or it can be a class too. So under permits, there can be no more and no less than these exact classes that are extending the superclass. And I have them implemented down below. One thing you'll notice is that each of these subclasses has a modifier next to them. So it's a rule that any subclass of a sealed class has to have an explicit modifier to say what its inheritance is going to look like. So that can be final, which means it'll have no subclasses, or non-sealed, which is just the explicit way of saying this is a default class, or sealed. And then, as I said before, will be accompanied by a list of permitted class on the right. There's a couple of restrictions to how these can be declared. So a sealed class and its subclasses must belong to the same module if you're using modules. But if it's in an unnamed module, they must be in the same package. All right. So there's a couple of JEFs that this works really well with. One of them that I mentioned earlier is records. And so that's a way of modeling data within the class itself. So as you can see here, the constant expr record has looks a little bit different, and it has an integer I here. So that's saying that's the data that's being held by this data type class, basically. Records are implicitly final. Oh, I forgot to put the permits list here. My bad. This would not compile. But there should be a permits list here with all of these expressions going down the side. Records are implicitly final, which means I don't have to put an extra modifier here, which makes this look a little bit cleaner. And this is a nice way of representing data further by representing, data classes as data with, and by connecting, I guess, all of the classes together in one superclass of data. But then the cool thing about this is that sealed classes and records together create an algebraic data type. And that is a type made out of types. And this is the most simple definition I can find. Basically what it is a combination of product types and sum types. So records are the product types, and it means the number of possible values for them can be calculated. So before I said that the const expr has an integer, so we know exactly that it has to be some integer. There's a finite number of integers, so we can calculate that. And then field classes are the sum types, which means there's a finite number of those. And another example in computer science of this is trees. And so we know what can be in each node of the tree, and we also know when to stop looking for new branches, hopefully. So all that explanation just to say that algebraic data types, so these records and sealed classes, are analyzed by pattern matching, and that is another preview JEP that's been in 14 and 15. And it's just a much cleaner way of being able to switch over all of these calculator buttons for my example, but data types, and make it look cleaner. So as you can see at the bottom, since we know exactly how many types of this expression class there are, there's no need for any kind of default case that's not going to make sense for this scenario anyway. And you can also see that it takes the record input and does something with them in the switch statement. So that's kind of sealed classes integrated into a couple of the other preview features. Sealed classes in the JVM, just go over this really quickly. So for those of you who are familiar with bytecode, you'll probably know that there's an ACC final public flag for the final modifier, but that's not how sealed classes are done. They're done more similarly to records, where there's a optional attribute in the class file instead. The one for sealed classes is called permitted subclasses. So if it exists, it's sealed. If it doesn't exist, it's not sealed. And it contains a list of the class names of the permitted subclasses. And this is used in class loading. So if a class is loaded that tries to extend a sealed superclass, and that class does not have it in its permitted subclasses list, it will be rejected. And finally, there's a couple new methods included in JavaLang class. Also really similar to records, there's a permitted subclasses, which returns a list of class descriptors of each of the permitted subclasses for the class you're calling it on. And it is sealed to know whether or not this class is sealed. That's all I got. Any questions? All right, thanks.
Thanks, Theresa. Pull the agenda back up and everyone see the Hangout agenda.
Yeah, I see your screen, Dan.
Yeah, I'm still getting used to Blue Jeans, so I'm hoping I'm showing the right screen.
Yeah, it's the Google Doc for the agenda for the meeting is what you've got showing right now.
Thank you. All right. We don't have any other lightning talks scheduled right now. I still need to reach out to Hung to talk about the hidden classes JEP that came in 15 to see if he's able to give a lightning talk here about that. But if there are other features or other areas people would like to talk about, please feel free to add them to the agenda or reach out to me and we can get them scheduled. Taking a quick look at the new user-raised issues. I don't see anything that's come in the last week. So I'll just pause for a minute and see, is there anything in this list that people want to discuss today or think needs some attention and it's not getting it? Then we'll jump back to the agenda and just remind everyone about labeling things with help wanted or beginner to really make it easy to add people into the or help people begin contributing to OpenJ9. Take a look at the download trends as well. Daily downloads are going down right now. Once we get JDK 15 out, I'd expect to see a bit of a jump in this as well. So hopefully in the next little bit, we'll see an uptick in those downloads. Does anyone have any comments or questions around the download trends? Jump back to the agenda. For the 0.22 Java 15 release, Pete, I believe you made tags for that, and the builds are being triaged at the moment. Has anything
That's correct.
come up?
Yes, I can give you an update on that. So we're nearly there in terms of finishing the triage. So in terms of tests that run, I think it's all known issues, which I don't think we have a problem with. But Adopt's had a bit of an issue with the Z Linux machines, which been a bit problematic. So I'm trying to push through the failed Z Linux builds from last night and rerun them. It's just the tests left to run on the Z platform. I'm currently killing all of last night's nightly builds that are getting in the way. I'm nearly done with that. So once I've cleared that backlog, the build or the tests should complete, I think, in about an hour and a half. I'd like to think by about 6 o'clock-ish, I should have the last set of test results, which we can then validate with Peter and Shelley, and then hopefully publish.
Okay. This evening. Is there any issues that need help or support from others to be able to move this forward?
I think we're good. It's just literally process test time, build time. We had a bit of a trouble with the Z-Box, as I said. I think it should be fairly straightforward now. I think Peter, if you want to confirm that of the tests failures we've found so far, none of them are a problem for this release.
Yeah, I'll take another look. Did you add anything new since I looked at it earlier?
No, not yet.
It looked fine to me earlier.
Yeah, that's what I thought. Thank you. Yeah, so once I've got this release out of the way, I'll start on the milestone 1 build for 23. Maybe that's your next item you're going to talk about. Sorry.
It was perfect timing.
Yeah.
Thanks, Andrew.
Yeah.
I'll just mention AArch64. I did run the functionality test at OpenJ9. We hadn't done any of the work so that we could run anything on Java 15. So it took a while to get that in place. The weird thing was it took me 2 tries to build the compressed refs VM for AArch64. The first time there was some weird error, and it took me 3 tries to build AArch64 XL. But once they got built, they passed all the testing for sanity and extended functional.
Yeah, I think I found for some reason the XL Arch64 had more test failures for some reason.
Yeah, so I only ran functionality, and those were green for the run that I did. I didn't run any other suites.
So
and I know we had some existing issues in other suites already. So
yeah, Sanity OpenJDK, there was, I think, about 20 or so failing tests.
Yeah, it's quite a lot. That's more than before, right?
Yeah, but has someone gone in and added them to the problem list like they did in the previous releases? I don't know.
I'm not sure what does that mean?
Problem list 15 the same as the other? But okay, worth looking at closer.
What do you mean? Did we add them to the problem list?
In some previous versions for that platform, some tests are excluded, but each version has its own exclude list.
But we ran M2 testing on AArch64, and I don't think we saw 20.
Yeah, I guess we did. Yeah.
I don't think we saw 20 issues.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm wondering if it's a machine issue. The fact it's a bit odd that why would those tests fail on XL but not?
Yeah, let me look. If they're JDI, it's likely machine issues, but I haven't looked at that list. So that's in the TSC issue, is it?
It is, yeah.
Okay.
I didn't delve into each individual one because there was a lot of them.
Yeah. I'll take a look.
So, yeah.
All right. Well, given the intention is to release that as an early access build, some level of failure on that platform is acceptable.
Yeah.
I don't want to see that interfere with being able to get the rest of the Java 15 release out.
Yeah, nobody does. This has been blocking all of the repos at Adopt. We can't continue working at Adopt until we finish the release. So unless it's something completely outrageous, it won't be blocking.
And if it is something completely outrageous, then I would rather drop Arch 64 from the 15 release than delay it any further.
Yeah. Okay.
And then 0.23. Pete, did the code split occur?
Yeah, so I was away on Monday unexpectedly, but I split from the builds that happened Monday night, which were pretty much the same as the builds on the weekend. I think there's one thing that slipped in. I was hoping it wasn't harmful, it didn't cause any test failures. So.
And has the M1 build started then?
No, I was waiting to get this release out of the way first. So once, hopefully in a couple of hours, I've got this out of the way, I shall then kick those off overnight.
That's good. And if we take a look at that milestone plan, there are currently 38 open items in here, which means we have a lot of things to triage and figure out, are they stop ship this release? Are they likely to make this release? Are they something we need to be moving forward again or closing out? So I have seen some effort effort to triage this page. So thank you to those who've been doing that. Let's continue to do that to try to get this list of issues closed out so that we are ready for the 0.23 release. And given that we've now branched for this release, any features that need to get into the 0.23 will need to be double delivered. So committers and reviewers, please be aware of that as we move towards this release.
Yeah, I just realized I never actually put that on Slack, I don't think, so I'll make an announcement.
Thanks, Peter. And we're aiming right now for an October 4th milestone 2, which doesn't give us a huge amount of time to close out these issues. So please do be focused on them. In terms of our general business discussions, we have an adopt update.
I haven't updated the minutes here. I guess we're just trying to get through the release. There's probably not a whole lot of other stuff that's changed. All of this still is applicable. We are going to participate in a Hacktoberfest. So for those people working at the project, or if you note that there's something you want to see picked up, please tag it or put a comment in an issue, and we'll try to get it included in the list of things that gets tackled. Nothing else new, I think, for this week.
Thanks, Shelley. In terms of machines, Adam or Joe, is there an update?
Not much change since last week, so we're still down on some Cent X machines. Haven't had any cycles to action those. The Windows machines are in the process of being transferred over for the account side, which means recreating them from scratch. There's just a few more issues we're working on the one machine before we clone them out, so they're expected to have them this week. That's about it.
Thanks, Adam. In terms of any other business, Devin, how's the CMake migration going? Devin, I see you've unmuted yourself, but I can't hear you.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, so the AIX builds, I had a build run on the Eclipse CI machines, and there was one failing test there, which I think is just an issue with some of the setup, because I saw the same test fail in the same way on one of the nightly builds. So I'm just investigating that, but in the meantime, I have the draft PR open to make that the default there. And for the Windows stuff, I believe all the changes I need are in, and so I am just running a build to confirm that everything works before I mark that PR to switch that default over as ready for review.
Okay. And the ZOS build issues, are they still on hold?
Yeah.
Then the next item on our any other business list is the Kubernetes Helm and operator discussion.
I've had some offline discussions with Raghu and Chris, who were opening that PR. Raghu wasn't able to make the meeting today. We've had some discussions around some of the things that were being raised in terms of licensing, compatibility with the source-only release, and the quantity of code. I think that there's a growing understanding of some of those concerns, and I think Raghu is planning on posting an update shortly with some thoughts on how we might proceed with that. So I think we'll just wait for Raghu to make his update on there, and then we can look at what to do next. I think the only question I had for you, Dan, was whether you had any progress on whether you think there's any concern around the source-only project designation and the things contained in those PRs.
I think the Helm chart is pretty clearly I think the Helm chart is easy to say is source only. The operator, it's a less clear answer, and so we still need discussion with the foundation around what that means for our project, given the source only charter.
Right.
So I think the Helm issue we can proceed, given the discussion and updates from Raghu that are hopefully coming in the future. The operator will have to hold for now while we work through what it means to be a source versus binary project.
Okay. Yeah, and I did emphasize that the provenance of the code that's being contributed does need to be made very clear, especially since there was files added in at least one of those that were claimed to be owned by IBM, but were being contributed under an Apache license. So I've been trying to ask whether IBM, like the contributors and/or their company, own that code entirely and can therefore consider contributing it under the standard license that we use, or whether there are outside sources for any of that, and if so, where they came from and why that license then has to be attached to them. I haven't gotten a clear answer on that. I'm hoping Raghu will post it, but I, for one, am going to have reservations until they make the provenance clear.
Yeah, I agree around that. I think, and I've passed this to Raghu and company as well, that talking about the problem they're trying to solve, really being clear on what pieces they are addressing with any given pull request and with any given solution would help anyone trying to review that code and to understand where it fits in our project. very much taking us on the journey that they've been going on rather than showing up at the final step would certainly help.
Yes, and I in our conversations, I did also reemphasize the concern about the size of the contributions and the fact that all of the dependencies seem to have been embedded rather than being potentially just sort of downloaded as part of a build step. I suggested that if it was possible to pull some of those dependencies out and have them downloaded or linked or whatever, so that the CQ ends up more as a works with rather than an embedding. I think that would also make the things easier to maintain and also easier for people to review. So.
Thank you, Andrew, for having those conversations with Raghu and for helping to push this forward.
No problem. My pleasure.
I just wanted to point, just on a new note. I looked at the failures for the Arch64 stuff. Those are actual compiler crashes, which do look like they've not been seen before. I'll run grinders and update the TSC issue.
Okay. If there's a large set of compiler crashes in those tests, then I would be okay with pulling Arch64 out of the release just to make sure we can continue to proceed.
Yeah.
Thanks, Shelley. In terms of the microJIT, do we have an update?
I'm just looking at the interface here. I don't see Scott on the call. The next scheduled meeting for that is this Thursday at 3:30. All welcome. Work is proceeding at the University of New Brunswick. I haven't heard further updates on that. I think they've been head down trying to take on board the discussions we've had. So there'll be an update on that call for anyone interested.
Sandra? I don't see Daryl on the call, so we will skip over the ARM32 discussion again. It may be a discussion that has to move into the issue or via Slack just to be able to make progress there. We'll point out for the snapshot branch that the branch has been created. There's a template for making new issues to get the snapshot label added to them easily. And thank you to Daryl for doing the first update of those branches this week to help track master. If people are interested, there's also a snapshot channel on Slack to join as well to be able to collaborate more broadly around this. So I don't think this needs to continue to be on the agenda, so I'll remove it now, and we can move to those other areas for collaboration and discussion on it. In terms of next item, the OpenJ9 API doc automation, Sue, Esther, or Adam, is there an update here?
Yeah. So I just wanted to bring this to the attention since Pete mentioned it to me. So the doc team reached out to me a little while ago to add some automation around updating the JavaDoc API files. So right now, when changes are made, developer is responsible to sort of get the doc changes updated as well, and it's sort of a disconnected process. So we wanted to add some automation around that. So the idea is that after a PR is merged, we would rebuild all the JavaDoc for each version and sort of lay it over the existing, and then if there was a diff, we would automatically open a PR and tag the right people for it. So we've sort of broken it down into several steps that can be done iteratively and then tied together at the end. So the first step was to get what I call the merge builds going. So I did set that up yesterday on the OpenJ9 Jenkins, but for now we've just set it to run daily. Pete didn't think it was necessary to run it after every PR. Plus we have to do it for each version we're doing. So right now it's just set up for 8 and 11, but we could should probably be doing 15 as well.
Yeah, I don't think there's enough
I don't know, Sue,
changes.
you wanted to add any more to that, or?
No, I think the diff you did from the build yesterday was
Just
quite
covering it?
extensive,
Okay.
but there was quite a lot of changes in there.
Yeah,
But I don't think we'll see that level of change going forward. So
yeah,
yeah, I mean, once a day is probably
right.
maximum we need.
Even once a day
Okay.
might be overkill. I don't think there's a lot
The
of
idea
changes
on doing
that
every
actually
PR
change
was that,
JavaDoc.
Well, we certainly
okay,
don't want to be using up machine time. It needs to be used elsewhere. We're only publishing,
for
once
nothing,
every,
yeah.
well, times a year. But it'd be good if we could do it at least weekly.
Yep, I figure the priority was to get it working, and then once we have it working, we
Yeah, I mean, whatever we decide on
schedule.
the schedule.
Yeah.
Okay. Is there a smarter way to determine if there will be changes without having to compile it?
Doesn't the build automatically produce the JavaDoc in its current form? I believe it's a prerequisite of the all target that we build. So each, I don't know if PR testing does it, but certainly our nightly
Yes.
builds would build the JavaDoc, and we'd see problems if if that failed.
It's a shame we
Yes,
haven't got
so the
Simon
idea with the
Rushton on
separate
today.
build is to,
I say Simon's done a lot of work on this as well, but he's out at the moment.
yeah.
So I'm not
Yeah.
seeing the doc being
So
archived
the
in
idea
the nightly
behind
build. I think there's a flag that needs to be enabled.
right.
We're not archiving
Yeah.
the,
So
the
that's
doc.
the idea behind the separate build, was to add the flag.
Sorry, Keith, were you saying something?
Yeah, I was just saying, I think the docs are built, but they're not archived, as I forget what Peter Adams said. Yeah.
I don't know if Adam mentioned it.
Right, so if we were to do it in the nightly, we would be, if we were to do it in the nightly, we'd be archiving it on every single compile. But if we were to do it in a separate build, then we'd only have to launch one compile for each version and then have that archived. So it'd be a lot less artifacts to keep around. And then we could have it on a different schedule than the nightly.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think that's fine because the JavaDoc's the same for every platform.
Almost.
I think we only have a
Right.
difference for maybe ZOS.
Yeah, ZOS is different, but then yeah, most others are the same. So I don't know if we need to be concerned about it at this point.
You think we have a difference other than ZOS?
Not
Somewhere?
that comes to mind. So, well, actually, no, I was thinking about the CUDA for J API, but it's on all platforms. It just behaves as if there are no GPUs in places where they can't be. So the API is not different, so the JavaDoc's fine. So no, I can't think of anything besides ZOS that would be significantly different.
And then I thought there might be some timestamps or something. It seems to me that Simon was trying to compare docs and found that there was some timestamps, and he may have even found an option that made it
Yes.
easier to compare the JavaDoc.
Yes, I believe there is an option that sort of strips out the date the JavaDoc was generated, which is that source of difference, right?
So yeah, so unless we want to be updating the docs daily or weekly or whatever the schedule we decide on, we might want to do a comparison and see whether they actually change before we go and update them.
Right. And so, yeah, I guess the flow would be we do a regular build without the dates, decide if there's any significant differences, and then if there are and we want the dates, then you do another build with the dates and then push that to the wherever it's going to live.
Yeah, the last diff that Adam did, there was loads of stuff in there, including kind of HTML tags that moved slightly. And I don't know if that's going to happen regularly or whether that was just a one-off. So I think we're just going to have to see how we get on. The
Well, I mean,
timestamps were certainly one of the things that were highlighted.
OpenJDK changes the implementation of JavaDoc. It seems quite regularly, so that there are differences in the output regularly doesn't surprise me.
Okay.
The other thing we could do is forget about trying to compare it and just run a build once a week and update it, no matter whether it's changed or not. It's too hard to compare.
Yeah, the problem with that approach is
So just rely on the Git.
fill up pretty quickly in terms of the size, right?
Presumably, it would take care of it if there weren't actually any changes. It would.
No, if you build it today and you build it tomorrow, and it has today's date versus tomorrow date, every file is changed pretty much.
That's true.
So the PR I did open has about 2,200 changes, but the files haven't been updated for a little bit, like months. So that could be why.
Yeah, I doubt there's that many changes to the actual.
I could try and rerun it again and see if it. I try and run it again on very similar commit or something a little bit newer and see if it changes again.
Yeah, and track down that option to turn off the timestamps.
Yeah, I'll talk to Simon about that. Esther did mention a little bit in her comment here. Simon tweaked the build, for example, doesn't have the date whereas it did before. So that might be what you're talking about. And also an HTML tag for meta content date is also no longer present. So that's probably what you're talking about.
Looking at the time, might be good to move this discussion back into the issue or pick it up on Slack. There was one other thing called out in the any other business section.
Yeah, it was just a brief notice from me. I posted on the general channel, but for anybody who wasn't looking, PANOSP is an open source, is a nonprofit in Canada that matches up undergraduate students doing project courses with mentors from open source projects to basically do cool work on the open source projects as basically as a credit course for their term. This term, myself and Vijay Sundarasan were interested in getting a nice profiling agent into OpenJ9. It's something we've been wanting to do for a little while, just to make some of the perf analysis and discussions in the community easier. We've got 4 students, 3 from the University of Alberta, 1 from UBC, who are working with us. We spent last weekend on a code sprint with them, getting them familiar with all the tooling, and they've got a branch of the OpenJ9 utils repo in one of their repositories where they're working on this this agent. It's posted in the perf tools channel I created on Slack for anybody who wants to follow along. The plan here is that the students are getting their heads around it, and hopefully come mid to late October we can have a lightning talk from them where they kind of show us what they've done, ahead of getting a pull request open to merge the first version, hopefully into the utils repo or the main repo, wherever we think it lives. But it's looking pretty promising to sort of having a sort of one-size-fits-all low-level profiling agent, just to make everybody's lives easier rather than separate tools. So anybody who's interested is welcome to follow along. If you have questions, please feel free to reach out. So just for everyone's awareness, thanks.
Thanks, Andrew. Then we'll wrap the call up here, and the next one of these is scheduled for September 30th. Please continue the conversations inside the issues on Slack or wherever needed for anything that we did have to stop or for any of the other topics that we need to keep more regular touch points going on. Thank you, everyone, and we'll chat again in this forum next week.